Mr. Chairman, meeting of the General Assembly pursuant to Resolution 76-262 on the use of the veto in the Security Council.
О рассмотрении случаев применения права вето в Совете Безопасности.
It can be roughly divided into two types. One is that the veto is used because a decision is acceptable or unacceptable in order to protect the interests of the state.
Решение или неприемлемость того или иного решения с точки зрения защиты национальных интересов.
It is another matter to take provocative actions against the Security Council in a single forum for the sole purpose to put a permanent member of the Security Council in an ugly way. This is the situation we encountered when we considered the United States draft resolution. As you are aware, on 24th of April, the Russian Federation voted B to H against the United States draft resolution on the non-deployment of nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction in outer space. For all its beautiful name, this document not only did not solve, for declared headings, the goal, because it has been resolved by other international agreements, but I can have a far-reaching impact on the entire disarmament process. In the course of its negotiations, we tried in vain to get the author to answer this question. Why try to repeat the difference through the UN Security Council? Existing international obligations in the field of space exploration. After all, we all know that the 1967 Outer Space Treaty was signed by 136 countries. Therefore, it contains an unconditional ban on the deployment of weapons of mass destruction in outer space. If there is reason to doubt its compliance, why not start this debate on a special occasion where all members of the General Assembly are represented? The United Nations Security Council has the power to deal with immediate threats to international peace and security. And it is this, not the abstract. Legal and disarmament discussions must waste its resources. The answer to this question, we never received from our American colleagues. It is important to mention another extremely dangerous element of the American project. In addition, it is clear that attempts to use the Security Council to impose new restrictions that have not been imposed anywhere before, including the Outer Space Treaty. This raises big questions from a legal point of view. It is unacceptable to impose such obligations without prior expert legal and technical discussion. In this case, they are of no practical value in addressing the issue of the global program of action and the non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. At the same time, we are even prepared to turn a blind eye to this obvious flaw. At the same time, through the efforts of colleagues in the United States and Japan, at least some meaning can be given. We propose to take advantage of this opportunity in order to provide the necessary impetus for the commencement of substantive work on these aspects of disarmament. Such a site. At the same time, we consider the result that such a signal is now needed in the context of the current stagnation in this negotiating track. The essence of our efforts is an amendment calling on all countries to take urgent measures to completely ban the placement of all weapons in outer space. I would like to emphasize not only weapons of mass destruction, but also any weapons. In other words, our proposal goes far beyond the US project to prevent the unfolding of outer space in an arms race. This will enable negotiations on a multilateral, legally binding instrument to begin, including discussions on the issue, and US proposals for new commitments to develop AMUs specifically for space deployment.
специально предназначенного для размещения в космосе.
Otherwise, we can't touch American texts at all.
Вообще не трогали.
But the American and Japanese co-sponsors flatly refused to consider our proposal, so they could not explain why negotiations on the draft text were not entered.
Переговоров по тексту проекта ни в
Not in the Security Council chamber.
вряд ли они удостоят
They and the delegation gathered in this hall today are unlikely to be able to explain their position.
в зале Генеральной Ассамблеи. Ответим за них на этот вопрос сами.
Let's answer this question for them ourselves.
Они не хотят на это идти.
They don't want to do this because the military doctrines of almost all major Western countries.
Западных стран сейчас предусматривают
Now
военные.
they provide for military exploration of space.
Соединенные Штаты и их
The
союзники
United States is their ally. Some time ago, plans were announced, including the deployment of weapons,
размещение оружия, в частности ударных боевых систем,
especially the attack combat system in outer space,
применение силы или угрозы
the use or threat of force against outer space, and the use of outer space for military
и
operations.
его использование для проведения боевых операций. Об этом прямо указано в ряде
This is clearly stated in some of the space strategies of Western countries, which can be easily found in the public domain.
Поэтому не случайно все
Therefore, it is no coincidence that the United States has actively resisted any initiative aimed at preventing an arms race in outer space in previous years.
в космосе. Яркий пример многолетней
A vivid example of years of lockdown.
Соединенными Штатами Российской
The United States, Russia, and China proposed a draft treaty on the prevention of the placement of weapons in outer space, which was prepared in 2008.
который был подготовлен еще в 2008 году. Уважаемые коллеги, не дайте
Dear colleagues, don't let the wrong thing happen today.
все заявления западных стран
All the statements made by Western countries about their interests,
по сохранению
the dialogue on maintaining the peace of outer space, which many of us, will hear in this hall today, are hypocrisy and double standards.
их голосования против нашей попытки
Their vote against our amendment, they are placed in space, and any type of weapon is better than this illustration.
При этом мы благодарим тех,
At the same time, we thank the 7 members of the Security Council who voted in favor of our amendment.
они доказали,
They have proved that there are enough sane delegations in the Council to reflect the will of the majority of the United Nations who share our common goals.
последовательно разделяющего общие с нами цели ПГВК.
PGTK
Уважаемые коллеги, Россия
Dear Russian colleagues have always been committed to their obligations under international law.
однако потакать чьим-то агрессиям
However, we will not indulge anyone's aggressive plans and give the green light to politicized double-bottom initiatives.
мы не будем. Как хорошо известно всем в этом зале,
As is well known to all in this hall,
конструктивную линию
we have been working constructively for many years and have been promoting this in the relevant forums of the First Committee of the Conference on Disarmament,
Комиссии ООН по разоружению,
as the United Nations Disarmament Commission, the United Nations Committee on Outer Space, initiatives aimed at preventing an arms race in outer space.
мы также неизменно
We also maintain our consistent position that outer space should be maintained for peaceful purposes only.
исключительно для мирных целей. И хотя мы не видим и не
Although we do not see or expect a balanced and objective approach from Western
для
countries.
объективного подхода, мы, руководствуясь особой ответственностью,
Based on the special responsibility of the permanent members of the United Nations Security Council to maintain peace and stability after voting on the United States text, we have proposed our alternative Security Council draft resolution.
по ПГВК.
by PGK.
Он основывается на хорошо
It is based on the language well known to the General Assembly and enjoys the broad support of the overwhelming majority of United Nations member states.
охват нашего проекта широк.
Our project covers a wide range of areas and aims to reaffirm the commitment of states not to use outer space for the deployment of weapons of mass destruction or conventional weapons.
Только так возможно не допустить
Only in this way can outer space be prevented from becoming another area of tension and armed confrontation, and all countries without exception can have free and equal access to outer space.
имеем в виду открыть наш проект
I would like to invite all members of the General Assembly to co-sponsor our draft before voting on it.
Призываем делегации его
We encourage delegations to sponsor it in accordance with established procedures.
что на этот раз у большинства членов
We hope that this time the majority of council members will have the common sense and interest to maintain outer space as a peaceful environment.
возобладает над попытками политизировать столь важную для
It will prevail over attempts to politicize a topic so important to normal life on Earth.
не упустить.
We urge you not to miss it.
В завершение хочу еще раз подчеркнуть
Mr. President, I would like to emphasize once again the absurdity of the situation surrounding the United States project.
американский постоянный представитель в своем выступлении по
After all, the United States permanent representative herself said in her speech on the basis of the vote that the Russian president has repeatedly confirmed that Russia has no
планов размещать ядерное оружие в космосе.
plans to deploy nuclear weapons in
Она
space.
также признала, что непринятие этой резолюции не
She also acknowledged that the failure to adopt the resolution would not affect Russia's existing obligations under the 1967 Outer Space Treaty not to deploy nuclear weapons in outer space.
Тогда зачем вообще Соединенные Штаты и Япония
So why did the United States and Japan introduce this project if it had no impact?
Вот как это со свойственным нашим американским коллегам
This is how the permanent representative of the United States explained this with the cynicism of our American colleagues in a conversation with reporters after the Security Council vote on April 24th.
она прямо указала, что Вашингтон внес этот проект.
She bluntly pointed out that Washington proposed the project to analyze and expose Russia, they said.
Вот в чем разоблачить Соединенные Штаты так и не
It's just that the United States has not been able to explain anything clearly so far.
Может быть, к сегодняшнему заседанию и удалось что-то придумать.
Maybe today's meeting managed to come up with
В
something,
том, что мы хотели принять документ, направленный
exposing the fact that we wanted to adopt a document aimed at preventing an arms race in outer space.
разоблачили сами себя, показав, что
But then the United States exposed itself, showing that it is not pursuing this goal.
как бы то ни было, и что бы ни изобретали в Вашингтоне,
No matter how good the words are invented by Washington, no matter how good the words are, there is no doubt that our actions are correct. No one should have the UN Security Council.
если оперировать футбольной терминологией, то наши западные
If we use football terminology, then our Western terminology.
попросту симулировали падение
On April 24th, colleagues simply simulated the fall of the penalty area in an attempt to win a penalty dishonestly.
нечестным путем.
However, since their cunning and unfair play to most of the people gathered in the hall today is obvious, let's show the red card.
В зале очевидно,
Both in your statements and in co-sponsoring our alternative draft in the Security Council. Thank you.
так и за счет соавторства нашего альтернативного проекта в Совете Безопасности. Благодарю вас.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Russian Federation